So before we get started, I have created a bunch of different washes in my extra palette here through using water and my watercolor set. And so what I have done is create 5 different puddles of water and added some pigment or some paint into each one of these. And so what I was hoping to create was 3 different washes of brown, a light, a medium, and a dark, a lighter wash of green, and then a darker wash of blue. So before we even get started on applying them, I'm going to test them out on this little strip of watercolor paper. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my brush out of my water. I'll just dab it off right here and let's just test it. So this wash looks like that. That looks pretty light to me. Just test the second one. Yep. Okay, so that looks like a medium one right there. And then the last one, yep, looks darker like so. Okay, so that's what I have. I have 3 in a row. Yours may not be in a row on your palette lid. That's okay. Okay, now for the green wash, this will end up being our ground. Want to keep it lighter in case we can do some dry brushing on top later. So that looks pretty good. And then the blue wash for the sky, I want it to be a little darker. We're actually going to drag it into water a little bit later. So I have something that looks like that. That's perfect. Okay, so we've got everything is working itself out here. I've got enough of it to work on this little painting right here. Okay, so I'm actually going to move my watercolor set out of the way. I'm going to move my palette up here, and I am going to get started on this little painting right here. Okay, let me see if I can zoom y'all in. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to apply these washes to this watercolor painting. Now, this is a little drawing in 2-point perspective. We want this to continue to look 3-dimensional by our use of color. Okay, so we want the color to accent the 3-dimensionality of what this particular structure is. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to label this. You do not have to label it. This is just a reminder for me. The windows and the doors on both sides, we're going to label it with our lightest wash. I'm going to do across the front my medium wash, so M for medium, and then my side is going to be my darkest wash of brown. Okay, so these are all going to be browns. Okay, we're going to do the sky is going to be blue, grass is going to be green, yay. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my really small round brush. Okay, I could also grab a small flat, either one would work. And I'm going to dip it into my lightest wash of brown. Okay, so I'm just going to apply this really light wash for the windows and the doors, holding my paintbrush by the grippy. Okay. And I'm doing the same thing for this side as well. All right. Now, when we do our final watercolor painting, I'm going to encourage you all as students to jump around on your painting so that you're not painting 2 things that are wet side by side. Okay. Right now, I'm actually going to avoid that really smart piece of advice just in the interest of time. And we're going to attempt to leave like a little white strip around each of these wet areas. Remember, if 2 areas are wet that are side by side at the same time, they will merge or combine or bleed together. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my my medium wash here for the front, and I'll show you what I mean by leaving a little strip of white. Okay, so I'm going to hold my paintbrush. I've upgraded to a slightly larger one. Again, you can use a flat for this if you would like. And I'm going to take my time painting this in. Okay, now I'm going to stop a little shy of the border of this. Okay, so go slowly around your area that's wet. Remember, if you touch that, it will combine together. So a little white border is fine. You can also see with the medium wash how this looks slightly darker than the light wash. So we're doing good so far. Like I said before, on a normal painting, we would skip around. Okay, so we wouldn't paint 2 things that are side by side, one right after the other. Part of the frustration that comes from just painting with watercolor is the fact that things merge or combine together and then you feel like you have no control. Okay, so this is what I have so far. So I've got my light washes, I've got my medium one here. I am going to downgrade to my smaller paintbrush for this side. So I want this side to be darker, as I want it to look like it's receding in space. So I'm gonna grab my small paintbrush, this is a smaller area, and I'm gonna dip it in my last wash right here. Again, I'm gonna go very slowly and be very careful that I leave just a little bit of a border around these areas, little white border of paper around these areas that I just painted. Okay, because if I don't do that, they will combine together. Now, if yours do combine together, it's not the end of the world. This is just practice, but it will influence what the final product looks like. I'm using a small round brush for this. Again, you can use a smaller range flat. Make sure you hold that paintbrush by the grippy. All right, so see how I'm leaving a little bit of that white border. All right. Now, in just a couple of moments, what we're going to do is I am going to apply what's called a graded wash, leaving a little strip of white to there right for the edge. You can kind of see that. We're going to add a graded wash, so a wash that goes gradually from dark to light in the sky area. And then we're going to create another flat wash, light flat wash for the ground. All right, now as of right now, these two look very similar. I want them to dry a little bit differently. So I'm actually gonna add one more layer of this wash on here. As of right now, nothing on my paper is combining together. It's pretty awesome. So I'm gonna add another layer. Again, just being very careful to avoid those areas that I just painted. Okay, so see how this is starting to look three-dimensional ever so slightly. Love it, okay? And just a really quick reminder, you can go over watercolor areas. I wanna say 2 times. When you do 3 or more, you're getting into that gray area where you're gonna saturate the paper fibers and it's going to your paper's gonna start to pill on you, okay? So the next thing, we're gonna create a graded wash, okay? To create a graded wash, what that looks like, I'm gonna shift this over, I just wanna show you all, okay? So what I'm gonna do in the area for the sky behind my building here is I am going to, over this section, okay, so let's pretend this is my sky. Closest to the horizon, I'm going to add water, okay? And I'm gonna add water about halfway up, okay? So if I zoom y'all in, hopefully you can see this, okay? So the bottom section of this has glossy water on it. The top section is dry. And so I'm gonna dry off my paintbrush on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up my darker color on my paintbrush here, and I'm gonna add the color for the sky from the dry area into the wet area. So I'm gonna go back and forth a couple times over this. Okay, and I'm gonna drag it into the wet area, okay, like so. Now, as I start to drag it into the wet area, you'll notice that it starts to get lighter, okay? That is called a graded wash. So it goes gradually from dark to medium to light. One way you can do that is by dragging it into water. So this section here had water on it. I dragged it from the darker area into the lighter area, okay? Now let's say you do that and your graded wash looks like it's all of the same color. So it doesn't change from dark to light. What you can do is rinse your paintbrush, blot it off on your paper towel, okay? And in the area that you want it to be a little bit lighter, you can do something that's called a thirsty brush, okay? A thirsty brush just means that it will suck up some of the pigment like so and make it lighter, okay? So see how I just dragged my brush across that didn't have any water on it? It sucked that color up onto the brush, okay, and made it lighter. Every time you do a section, you do have to dab off on a paper towel. Okay, so let's say I want this to be a little bit lighter right here. That's great. I can dab that off, okay, like so. Now, what you want to avoid with this is you want to avoid scrubbing your brush into the paper back and forth. I would say you can only do maybe 2 sections on an area before you need to move on, okay? Because those paper fibers will start to pull apart, okay? Now, let's go ahead and add that to this right here. Okay, so I'm going to keep you guys zoomed in, I think, for this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I have water on my paintbrush right now. Okay, I'm gonna dab some of it off on my paper towel, okay? And I'm gonna add it, leaving a little strip of white. Horizon line about half up, okay? So leave that little strip of white. Otherwise, it will combine. Okay, so there's a little strip of dry weight paper all the way around my sky area. Okay, so from horizon line about halfway up. Okay, now what I'm gonna go ahead and do, let me zoom you guys back out, sorry. I'm gonna grab my blue wash from my palette, and I'm gonna go ahead and add it in the dry area. I'm gonna add it in the dry area and drag it to the wet area. Okay, so this is the dry area up here. I can redip. Okay, so as I drag it into the wet area, just being careful about going around my building, you'll notice how it becomes a little bit lighter. Oops, that was a close call. All right. And again, let's say you drag it into the wet area and it doesn't get any lighter. You can thirsty brush it. Okay, so I'm gonna rinse my paintbrush. I'm gonna blot it off on my paper towel, making sure it doesn't have any paintbrush drool on it. And I can do a section, okay? Every time I suck up some of the color, I do need to dab it off. I can only go over that same area, I would say maybe two times. So see how I'm sucking part of this up here? All right, and now I have something that goes gradually from dark to light, okay? So that's looking pretty good so far, all right? The last thing I want to add is I'm gonna add the green for the ground, okay? So the green for the ground is gonna go right in here, and again, I'm gonna rinse my paintbrush, I'm gonna blot it off, okay? I'm gonna grab that wash. This is just gonna be a flat wash, so it's not gonna go gradually from dark to light. I'm just gonna keep it the same. I could create a graded wash here if I wanted to. That's cool. I'm gonna leave that little strip of white so that these don't combine. It looks like this is almost dry anyway. Okay. And I'm gonna spread this around just to keep that ground light. Now I'm gonna keep this wash really thin because I think before this video ends, I would like to share with you all how to create some dry brushing on the ground as a foreground thing. Okay, just avoid your building if it's wet, so little strip of white, you can kind of see what I'm doing with that there. Okay, all right. All right, so before I do anything else, here's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. I am going to make my green wash here. I'm gonna make it a little bit darker, okay? So I'm gonna add a little bit more water. I'm done with it for the area that I need to cover, so I'll add a little bit more water. I'm gonna add more pigment from my palette into my wash, back and forth, back and forth. I could test it off if I need to. Okay, yep, that's looking all kinds of good. So see how dark that is, okay? Now this area here, let me zoom you guys back out. All right, so this area down at the bottom for the ground is not, it's not completely dry, so this may not work the way that we need it to. That's okay. So right now I've got a dark green wash that I can use for my dry brushing here. When you dry brush, you do want the area behind to be dry. Mine is not, so it may not work very well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse my paintbrush in my water cup. I'm going to make sure that the bristles are as dry as I can get them. Okay, so I'm going to use my paper towel, dab this off. Okay, and with the dry brushing, what you want to do is you want to essentially have your brush be as dry as possible. You want to use the texture of the bristles here to create some texture within your painting. Okay, so I'm dipping just the bristles in here. All right, and what I'm going to do is in this foreground area, you can kind of spread them apart too a little bit with your finger. In this foreground area, I'm just going to do a little bit of something that looks like this. This is not exactly how I wanted it to look, but that's okay. Kind of get the right idea. You can also grab some pigment directly from your paint set and do another layer if you want. Okay, but this is a way that you can add texture to your piece. Okay, that's as good as I can do today, I think. So let's go ahead and see if we can give that a shot. Okay, practice applying your different washes. Okay, so we have a light, a medium, and a dark to create depth within our piece. We have a graded wash for the sky, flat wash, and a little bit of dry brushing in the foreground just to start to make this look three-dimensional.